9 months of carrying, 9 weeks of bleeding, 9 shillings a year if fortune favours you. You feel the contradiction before you comprehend it. 9 lives promised, 4 lives permitted. 9 months of swelling flesh and shifting weight against your ribs, followed by 9 hours of tearing labour on a straw-stuffed stack that smells of damp wool and old blood. This was not the nursery rhyme of cradle songs and lace-trimmed bonnets. This was a biological ledger, balanced in ash and grief. For every delicate porcelain doll resting upon a mahogany shelf, 10,000 mothers wept into coarse flour sacks, their tears evaporating into cold brickwork before they could fall. You wake before dawn. The room is not a bedroom, it is a stone box. Frost traces jagged patterns along the single window pane. You breathe and your breath clouds, then vanishes. The mattress beneath you weeps dampness through the thin ticking. Your side aches. It has always ached since the 7th month, but tonight the pain is different. It pulls downward, it grips. You roll onto your back, and a low sound escapes your throat. You do not scream. Screaming wastes heat. You listen to the rhythmic, wet coughing in the corner. That is little Thomas, or what remains of him. His chest rattles like dry peas in a tin. You know the sound, you know the smell that comes next. Sweet rot, stagnant water, the unmistakable stench of the egg settling into the marrow. This was not unusual. Slow pan across a cramped Victorian cellar room. Peeling damp wallpaper, a single cracked wash basin, coarse wool blankets piled unevenly. Your fingers, cracked and reddened from lye soap and scrubbing floors, press against your swollen abdomen. The skin is tight as parchment. Another contraction rolls through you, sharp and unrelenting. You bite down on a strip of linen to keep your teeth from chattering. You count the stones in the wall above you. 1, 2, 3, 4. You have counted them 1,000 times. They do not move. You do not move. You are 22 years old. You have been a wife for 5 years. You have been a mother 4 times. You have buried 3. The parish clerk marked their names in a heavy leather-bound folio. Stillborn, scarlet fever, the cramps. He did not ask for payment for the ink, but he will ask for the burial fee next week. You do not possess the coin. You never possess the coin. You work the laundry for the merchant's house on Thursdays, hauling copper tubs of scalding water up and down stone steps. You earn 6pence for a full day of scrubbing, boiling and mangling. 6pence buys half a loaf of stale bread and a measure of skim milk. It does not buy firewood. It does not buy laudanum. It does not buy a physician's visit when the bleeding begins and refuses to cease. This was not unusual. Ecless is a fairy tale told to children who have never tasted hunger. You are an inmate of this parish, bound by the poor laws that dictate your every movement. If you depart without permission, they will brand you a vagrant. If you beg upon the pavement, the constable will drag you to the workhouse. If you surrender to the workhouse, your husband will be separated from you in the mail yard, your surviving children placed with strangers or sent to the chimneys. You are trapped by geography, by statute, by the sheer physical weight of a society that views your labour as a commodity and your offspring as surplus. The iron latch on your door is rusted shut. You keep it that way. Opening it invites the landlord. Opening it invites the damp. Opening it invites the end of what little air remains. The bell outside strikes 6. The day begins before the sun clears the chimney pots. You rise, your legs trembling, the linen soaked through with something darker than water. You do not look at it. Looking requires energy. You wrap a shawl around your shoulders. It smells of coal smoke and yesterday's boiled cabbage. You shuffle to the hearth. The ashes are cold. You scrape them aside with a broken poker. You remember the first pregnancy. You remember the hope. You remember purchasing a ribbon, a cheap blue thing, to tie the door frame. You remember thinking the house would warm when the child arrived. The house never warmed. The child never drew breath. You were told it was God's will. You were told to be thankful for the trial. You learned then that gratitude does not feed the living. This was not unusual. This is 1862. You are a mother of the poor, and today might be your last. You pour a cup from the pitcher. The water is metallic, drawn from a communal pump 3 streets away. You drink it anyway. Your throat burns with thirst, but your stomach twists at the thought of the gruel they hand out at the casual ward. 4 ounces of oatmeal, boiled thin with water that tastes of iron pipes. 800 calories for 12 hours of oakum picking. 800 calories to grow a child, to mend torn lungs, to keep a heart beating against a body that demands rest it will never receive. The overseer calls it charity. You call it slow starvation. If you complain, you lose your place on the parish rolls. If you lose your place, you sleep on the embankment. The embankment claims you before winter does. You feel the next contraction begin. It starts low, a deep tightening like a fist closing around your spine. You brace against the wall. The plaster crumbles under your palm, leaving a fine white dust upon your skin. You breathe in, you breathe out, you do not pray. Prayer requires standing, and your knees have turned to water. You think of the women before you, the ones who perished in this same room, in the same year, with the same swelling bellies and empty pockets. They did not write their accounts down. History only remembers the names carved in stone, the names of the men who built the hospitals, the names of the doctors who studied the dead. You are alive, you are breathing, you are bleeding. You are waiting for the midwife who may come, or may not, depending on whether she possesses a shawl dry enough to brave the rain. This was not unusual. The door rattles. A shadow passes beneath the crack at the threshold. You do not open it. You know it is only the wind or the rats moving through the skirting boards. You sit upon the floor. The cold seeps through your skirts, claiming the bones of your hips, your thighs, your ankles. You pull the wool tighter. You close your eyes. The darkness behind your eyelids is the same darkness that fills the room, the same darkness that fills the churchyard gate, where the wooden markers lean at crooked angles. You listen to your own pulse. It is rapid. It is uneven. You are 22. You look 40. You have months left to endure, or perhaps hours. Slow zoom on a faded daguerreotype of a young Victorian woman, eyes hollow, dress patched at the elbows, holding an empty wooden frame. You press your palms flat against your stomach. The child moves a flutter, a shift, a demand. Life, stubborn and relentless, refuses to acknowledge the ledger. Life does not care about parish rates, or coal shortages, or the sixpence you will never earn again. You whisper a name into the cold air, not the name of the dead, the name of the living. You say it softly so the walls do not hear it. You say it like a vow. You say it like a warning. The contraction peaks. Your vision whites at the edges. You bite the linen. You hold your breath. You do not scream. Screaming wastes heat. You step into the alley. The air tastes of soot and wet ash. It coats the back of your tongue. It settles into the creases of your palms. The morning bell has rung, but there is no chime of industry here. Only the scrape of wooden clogs on cobblestones. Only the coughing of the men who line the dock gates, waiting for a foreman to point a finger and grant them another day of hauling. You do not wait. You cannot wait. Your body carries a deadline that the parish board does not record. You walk toward the wash house. The path slopes downward, flanked by brick walls weeping black moisture. The smell is overpowering. Coal tar, boiled cabbage, the sour tang of unwashed wool and stagnant privies. You pull your shawl higher. It does nothing to block the odour, but it shields you from the gaze of the constable stationed at the corner. If he recognises you, if he sees your swelling frame and marks you as an able-bodied poor idling the streets, he will direct you to the stone-breaking yard. You will swing a hammer until your wrists bleed. You will drop a child in the dirt. This was not unusual. Sepia photograph of Victorian laundry workers wringing massive sheets over copper vats. Steam rising, faces blurred by motion. The laundry door groans open. The heat hits you first. It is a damp, suffocating warmth that immediately beads upon your brow. Copper boilers line the back wall, their surfaces stained brown by mineral water and lye. You strip off your outer skirt. The cold air bites your ankles. You dip your hands into the first vat. The water scalds your cracked knuckles. You do not flinch. Flinching wastes seconds. You scrub the merchant's linens, tablecloths heavy with grease, napkins stained with port and gravy. Your knuckles bleed into the suds. The water turns pink, then grey. You swallow the bile rising in your throat. Hunger is a dull animal now. It claws at your ribs, but you ignore it. You have been hungry for so long that hunger feels like a companion. 6 hours of washing, 6 hours of scrubbing, boiling, mangling and ironing. You earn 3 pence for the full morning. 3 pence buys 4 ounces of dripping, or half a pint of ale to dull the cramps. You choose neither. You carry the copper tubs to the drying racks. Your spine protests with every step. The child inside you turns, a heavy roll against your pelvic bone. You pause, you breathe through your nose, you count the seconds. 10, 20, 30. You must finish before the overseer returns from his midday pint. If you leave early, you lose your name on the roster. If you lose your name, you become a casual poor. You will sleep in the casual ward, shoulder to shoulder with strangers, breathing air thick with consumption and despair. The lock-up time is 8. If you are late, you are locked out. You will sleep on the step. The damp will claim you. This was not unusual. You return to your room when the church bell strikes 1. The door sticks in the frame. You push it with your shoulder. The air inside is stale, thick with the smell of old bread and damp plaster. You sit upon the floor. You unwrap the parcel you carried from the market. 2 stale buns purchased yesterday. A wedge of hard cheese. You break a bun in half. You eat it slowly. You chew each fragment until it dissolves. Stimulates digestion. Digestion extracts calories. Calories are life. 140 calories in the bun, 60 in the cheese. You consume them like medicine. You do not taste them, you measure them. This is the arithmetic of survival. You have worked 4 hours. You have burned 800 calories. You have consumed 200. The deficit is 600. Your body will take the rest from your own flesh. It will dissolve muscle to keep the heart beating. It will leach calcium from your teeth to strengthen the child's bones. You feel it happening. A deep, hollow ache behind your ribs, a tremor in your hands. You close them into fists. This was not unusual. You think of your childhood. You think of the fields outside the city limits. You think of grass that smelled of dew, not ash. You think of a mother's lap before the fever took her. You think of the schoolhouse where you learned to read a single page of scripture. They took you at 12. They placed you in service. They handed you a scrubbing brush and told you to earn your keep. You never finished the second page. You never returned to the fields. You traded your youth for a roof that leaks. You traded your dignity for a parish number stamped in ink upon a ledger. The parish does not care if you read. The parish cares only that you produce labour, that you occupy a cot, that you do not become a burden upon the rates. You are a number. You are a line item. You are an expense waiting to be reduced. Archival workhouse ledger showing columns for able-bodied women, children under 10, dents per month, with heavy ink strokes crossing out names. You hear footsteps on the stairs. Heavy boots. The landlord. You freeze. You press your back against the wall. The door handle turns. It does not open. The lock holds. You exhale. You count the heartbeats in your throat. 1, 2, 3. You know what comes if he enters. He will demand the rent. 2 shillings and 6pence per week. You owe him a fortnight's worth. He will take your shawl if you cannot pay. He will take your blanket if you hesitate. He will leave the door open to the frost as a lesson. You have seen neighbours reduced to sleeping in empty coal scuttles, wrapped in sacks, breathing shallowly to preserve warmth. You will not become them. You touch your abdomen. You feel the weight. You promise yourself you will endure. You swallow the fear. It tastes like copper. This was not unusual. The afternoon light fades, the rooms grow cold. You wrap yourself in the thickest wool you own. You listen to the city outside, the clatter of iron-rimmed wheels, the shout of a costermonger hawking bruised apples, the whistle of the factory shift changing. You do not join the crowd. The crowd is not for you. You are confined to the margins. You are confined by law, by coin, by flesh. The Poor Law Amendment of 1834 dictates your every movement. It mandates the workhouse test. It removes outdoor relief. It tells you that poverty is a moral failing, that charity must be degrading, that comfort breeds idleness. You are not idle. You are starving. You are carrying a life while your own is being measured, parcel by parcel, into the dust. The system does not see a mother. It sees a liability. It sees a mouth to feed. It sees a pair of hands to break stone or pick oakum. It does not see the life swelling beneath your ribs. It does not care if that life survives. You lie down upon the floor. The cold seeps upward. You pull the blanket over your head. You create a small world of darkness and breath. You count the cracks in the ceiling. You map them with your eyes. You trace the patterns. You remember the blue ribbon. You remember the empty cradle. You remember the ledger. The mathematics do not balance. They never will. You close your eyes. You wait for sleep. Sleep is the only mercy you can afford. It costs nothing. It demands nothing. It offers a temporary escape from the arithmetic. You drift, you dream of fields, you dream of grass, you dream of a child who draws breath. You wake to the sound of coughing. The dream dissolves. The cold returns. You open your eyes to the dark. You breathe. You endure. You count the hours until the next morning bell. You know the routine. You know the weight. You know the deficit. This was not unusual. You press a hand to your stomach. The child kicks. A sharp, sudden motion, life insisting. You whisper into the wool. You do not weep. Tears require salt your body cannot spare. You hold your breath. You listen to the silence. You prepare for the next contraction. The ledger remains open. The ink is wet. The numbers shift. You wait. The frost arrives like a sentence. It does not knock, to a room encased in white. The window is a solid sheet of ice. The air inside bites exposed skin. Your fingers are stiff. Your toes are numb. You reach for the coal scuttle. You scrape the bottom. Metal scrapes metal. Dust rises, grey, useless dust. The last of the fuel is gone. You possess 2 shillings and 4pence in your apron pocket. Coal costs 4pence per hundredweight. You cannot spare the coin for warmth. You need it for bread. You choose survival over sensation. You pull the damp wool tighter. You feel the cold penetrate the layers. It settles in your joints. It aches behind your eyes. You breathe slowly. Your breath plumes in the dark. You do not complain. Complaining burns calories. This was not unusual. Slow zoom on a Victorian tenement wall. Frost creeping along plaster cracks. A single dead leaf trapped in ice. You dress in layers. 3 shifts. 1 petticoat. The outer skirt patched and thin. You wrap a strip of burlap around your abdomen. It smells of vinegar and old sweat. It does nothing to warm you, but it binds you together. You step into the alley. The cobblestones are slick with black ice. You grip the brick wall. You slide forward. You listen. The street is too quiet. The usual morning chorus of costermongers and bootblacks has vanished. The silence is heavy. It presses against your eardrums. You see the chalk mark on the door opposite yours. A crude circle. A warning. The word sick scrawled beneath it. You step back. You lower your gaze. You know what the circle means. Phthisis. The white. It has moved through the building like smoke through a chimney. You hear it now. A wet, tearing cough from the 3rd floor. A child's wail, then nothing. You quicken your pace. You do not run. Running risks the fall. The fall risks the fracture. The fracture risks the end. This was not unusual. The washhouse door groans. You push it open. The heat is gone. The boilers are cold. The water in the vats is stagnant. The overseer stands by the counting desk. His face is pale. His breath fogged. He holds a ledger. He does not look at your face. He looks at your hands. Late, he says. You do not answer. You cannot speak. Your throat is raw from the damp air. He dips his pen. Deduction. 1 halfpenny for idleness of hours. The ink scratches the page. It marks your name. It reduces your already meagre wage. You step forward. You reach for the first tub. Your fingers are useless claws. You try to grip the edge. Your hands slip. The copper rim crashes against the stone. Hot water slops over your ankles. You stumble. Your shoulder strikes the brick wall. Pain flashes white. You do not cry out. You straighten yourself. You wipe the water from your skirt. You return to your place. The overseer watches. He marks another line in the ledger. Careless. Another halfpenny you swallow. The deduction leaves you with 1 penny for the day. 1 penny buys a stale crust. It does not buy salve for the burn. You feel the blister rising beneath your wool. You ignore it. You resume scrubbing. The water freezes your wrists. You rub them. The skin cracks. Blood mixes with suds. You do not stop. This was not unusual. By noon the smell changes. The air thickens with the odour of sickness, sweet rot, stagnant water. The unmistakable stench of cholera morbus taking root in the lower yards. You taste it on your tongue. You spit. It does not leave. You hear a commotion at the far end of the alley. A cart arrives. Wooden wheels groan over ice. 2 men in dark coats step down. They carry a stretcher. They do not knock. They enter the building with the chalk mark. You watch from the corner of your eye. They emerge moments later. The stretcher is draped in rough canvas. It sags in the middle. The men carry it without a word. They load it onto the cart. The wheels turn. The cart moves away. You know who it is. You know the age. 20 years. 2 children left behind. You know the children will be split. 1 to the parish nursery. 1 to a stranger's attic. The family fractures under the weight of coin. The system does not see grief. It sees inventory. It sees vacant rooms to be filled. It sees a new tenant to be extracted for rent. You feel the child inside you shift. A heavy roll. A demand. You press your palm to your stomach. You promise silence. You promise endurance. This was not unusual. Archival photograph of a Victorian cholera handbill warning of contaminated water, faded ink, pinned to a splintered door. You recall the broadsheet nailed to the parish gate. You read it whilst waiting for your number to be called. The printer's ink was thick, the language precise, devoid of mercy. The casual wards in St Giles and Clerkenwell report a mortality rate amongst able-bodied women of 1 in 9 during the winter quarter. Puerperal fever, aggravated by malnutrition and damp lodgings, claims the majority. Those admitted in labour without sufficient provision for fire or bedding perish before the week concludes, leaving issue to be distributed by the relieving officer as paupers of the lowest class. You memorise the words. They are not statistics. They are ghosts. They sit in the empty cradle. They hang in the cold air. They wait for you. You feel the truth of them in your bones. You are not fighting nature. You are fighting a machine built to consume you. The machine does not pause for labour. It does not spare the pregnant. It grinds forward. It measures your breath. It counts your pulse. It waits for the slip. This was not unusual. The walls absorb the coughing. The ledgers record the names. The light fails early. Winter shrinks the day. You return to your room. The cold has deepened. You strike a match. It dies. You strike another. The flame catches the newspaper you tore from a discarded parcel. You feed it to the hearth. The paper burns blue, then black. It gives no heat. It gives only light. You sit beside it. You unwrap the stale crust you purchased with your penny. You break it. You eat. Your jaw aches. Your gums bleed. You feel the blister on your ankle throb. You press it. It weeps clear fluid. You wrap it in a scrap of clean linen. You have no clean linen. You possess only the torn edge of a shift. You use it anyway. You lean against the wall. The plaster is damp. It stains your shawl. You do not move. Movement is pain. Stillness is cold. You choose stillness. You listen to the building settle. Wood contracts. Somewhere above you a child cries. The cry is thin, desperate. It is cut short by a cough. A mother's voice murmurs something low, a shushing sound. Then silence returns. The silence is worse. It means the mother has no voice left. It means the child has stopped fighting. You close your eyes. You count your breaths. In, out, in, out. You feel the contraction begin. Deeper this time. Longer. Your muscles seize. You bite the linen strip. You do not break it. You ride the wave. It crests. It falls. You are left shaking. Your teeth chatter. You pull the blanket over your head. You create a tent of darkness. You breathe the damp wool. You smell the coal dust. You taste the copper in your mouth. You whisper a name into the fabric. You do not weep. You endure. You wait. And then it got worse. The contraction arrives without warning. It does not build. It strikes like iron. Your back arches off the floor. A sharp sound tears from your throat. You do not recognize it. The blanket falls away. The cold hits your skin. You press your hands to the stone. The plaster cracks. Dust rises. You breathe. You do not breathe. The room spins. The single candle gutters. The flame dips. You count. 1, 2, 3. The pain doubles. It triples. It becomes the only thing that exists. There is no room, no alley, no ledger. Only the tearing, only the weight. You call for the midwife. You know she will not come. She is tending to the merchant's wife across the river. You are not a priority. You are parish stock. You whisper into the dark. The words scatter. They fall to the floor. They mean nothing. Slow, static shot of an empty wooden cradle in shadow. A single moth-eaten blanket draped over the side. Dust falling through weak light. Hours pass. You do not know how many. Time fractures. It bends around the pain. You feel something shift. A rupture. A warmth that should not be there. You look down. The wool is soaked. Not with water. Not with sweat. The colour is wrong. Dark. Metallic. You know this sign. The midwife taught it to you years ago, before you understood the price, before the ledger claimed your name. The bleeding is not labour, it is separation. The child is pulling away. The cord is failing. The blood flows. It pools upon the floorboards. It seeps into the cracks between the planks. It disappears into the rot beneath. You press your palms against the fabric. You try to stop it. You cannot. You are emptying. The life you carried is leaving you, piece by piece, drop by drop. You feel the weight decrease, the hollow. You close your eyes. You listen to your own pulse. It is faint. It is irregular. You count the beats. They slow. You breathe. You do not. Prayer requires a God who listens. You have learned that heaven does not count pennies. It does not open doors for the poor. You lie still, you wait for the end. It does not come. It only lingers. The silence stretches. It becomes heavy. It presses upon your chest. You open your eyes. The candle has burned low. The wax pulls on the room is grey. The dawn approaches, but it brings no warmth. It brings only light. Light that reveals the stain upon the floor. Light that reveals the stillness of your hands. You touch your abdomen. It is soft, deflated. The firmness is gone. The promise is broken. You feel nothing, not yet. The numbness protects you. It wraps around the core. It shields the truth. You know what comes next. The shivering, the fever, the sweet rotting smell of infection taking root where life should have been. You have survived this before. You remember the first, the stillborn son, wrapped in newspaper, carried in silence. Remember the second, scarlatina claiming the lungs at 6 months, the parish cart collecting the small coffin before the mother could wash her face. Remember the third, the cramps that seized the belly in the night, the doctor who came only to shake his head and demand a shilling for his trouble. You did not pay. You buried it yourself in the churchyard mud. You used your own hands. You dug the earth until your nails split. You placed the tiny bundle in the ground. You covered it. You walked away. You did not look back. Looking back invites the ghosts. They will follow you home. They already do. They sit in the corners. They watch you work. They wait for you to break. Sepia photograph of Victorian pauper burial ground. Leaning wooden markers. Overgrown grass. Heavy fog rolling through. You try to rise. Your legs do not answer. The cold has entered the marrow. The fever begins. It starts at the base of your skull. It moves downward. Heat spreads across your shoulders. Your skin burns. You sweat. The sweat is cold. It soaks, rises. You recognize it. Puerperal fever. The doctors call it childbed mortality. You call it theft. It steals the mother so the parish may save the burial fee for the infant. You laugh. A dry broken sound. It echoes off the brick. You hear yourself. You sound like the coughing in the alley. You sound like the ledger. You close your eyes. You ask the question that has haunted you since the first pregnancy. What is survival if it requires the surrender of every piece of yourself? What is dignity if it must be traded for a crust of bread? You worked until your hands bled. You starved until your ribs showed. You endured until your children fell silent. And for what? To become a statistic. To become a line in a folio marked deceased in the margin of a man's ledger. The question hangs in the damp air. It receives no answer. It cannot receive one. The system does not deal in philosophy. It deals in pounds, shillings and pence. It deals in bodies that labour until they break, then discards the pieces without ceremony. You have nothing left to give. The ledger is balanced. The debt is called in. You feel the weight of it upon your chest. It is heavier than coal. It is heavier than stone. Grief. The walls absorbed the silence. The earth kept the names. You reach for the shore. It lies just out of reach. You stretch your arm. The fingers brush the wool. You cannot grasp it. The strength is gone. The blood has left the extremities. You pull your hand back. You curl it against your stomach. You make yourself small. You try to preserve the remaining heat. You think of the 4 who survived. They are gone now. Taken by the workhouse, apprenticed to factories, sold for a month's relief. You do not know where they sleep. You do not know if they breathe. You hope they do. Hope is a dangerous thing. It keeps you alive when you should be permitted to rest. It drags you to the washhouse when your joints crack. It forces you to stand when your vision blurs. It is a chain. It is a burden. You are tired of carrying it. You let it go. You release it into the cold air. You watch it drift toward the ceiling. It vanishes into the shadows. You feel lighter. The pain dulls. The fever rises. You drift between waking and the edge of sleep. The room shrinks. The walls close in. The darkness becomes a blanket. It wraps around you. It does not burn. It soothes. You close your eyes. You listen to the rain. You listen to the distant bell. It strikes 3. The hour of the dead. The hour of the quiet. You breathe. In, out. The rhythm slows. The ledger closes. The ink dries. And you are left alone with the heavy silence you never do. That is the cruelty of it. You wake. The fever breaks. The room is colder. The stain is dry. You rise. Your legs tremble. You steady yourself against the wall. You wrap the damp shawl around your shoulders. You step over the dried blood. You do not look at it. Looking requires recognition. Recognition requires grief. You have no room for grief. You possess only the next hour, the next shift, the next calculation. You open the door. The alley is grey. The air is still. You walk. Your steps are slow. They are measured. They are heavy. You return to the wash-house. You step inside. The boilers are cold. The overseer does not look up. He marks the book. He reduces the wage. You dip your hands into the water. It burns. You scrub. You rinse. You wring. The cycle repeats. The machine turns. You are still turning with it. You are still breathing. You are still counting. The empty cradle waits. The silence remains. You carry it with you. It sits in your chest. It weighs more than the copper tubs. It anchors you to the floor. It keeps you from floating away. You endure. You survive. You persist. This was not unusual. You lift your gaze from the floorboards. The room expands. The walls dissolve. You stand outside yourself now, watching the parish unfold like a dark tapestry. The narrow alleys multiply. The cellar rooms stack upon one another. The brick chimneys exhale black smoke into a sky the colour of bruised iron. You hear it. Not a single cough. A chorus. 100 throats rattling behind damp timber. 1,000 pens scratching across thick paper. The relieving officer sits at his oak desk. He dips his nib into the inkwell. He writes. Mother deceased. Issues scattered. Relief suspended. The ledger closes with a heavy thud. It does not weep. It does not pause. It simply turns to the next page. The mathematics of empire require balance. The cost of industry demands sacrifice. You were never meant to survive the equation. You were meant to fuel it. Archival parish death register. Close up on handwritten columns. Ink smudged. Marginal notes reading phthisis, want, childbed fever. The numbers do not lie. They accumulate. They wait in the county archives for scholars to count them. In the poorest district, one mother in every 18 perishes within the fortnight of confinement. The wealthy lose 1 in 100. The disparity is not biological. It is architectural. It is the damp that seeps through single brick walls. It is the water drawn from wells downstream from the tanneries. It is the 12-hour shifts that fracture pelvic bones before they can knit. For every child who draws a first breath, 3 expire before their 5th winter. Scarlatina takes the lungs. Typhus claims the blood. Cholera morbus empties the body in hours. The workhouse infant wards record mortality rates exceeding 40%. 40%, 4 out of 10. You carry those ratios in your marrow. You are not an anomaly. You are a statistic waiting to be filed. This was not unusual. You compare it to the world you might have known. Imagine a modern maternity ward where 1 in 20 beds remains empty, where nurses ration blanket, where physicians demand coin before checking a pulse, where the state mandates that poverty must be punished before it is relieved. You would revolt. You would march. You would demand justice. Yet here, the punishment is woven into the statute. It is dressed in piety. It is called moral arithmetic. The system does not break, it adapts. The Public Health Act of 1840 arrives, but the pipes take decades to lay. The lying-in hospitals open, but the doors remain barred to the casual poor. The reforms trickle downward like water through cracked stone. They reach you only when you are too weak to feel them. Millions breathe this air. Millions bleed upon these floors. Millions leave behind cradles that gather dust in rented rooms. The machine grinds on. It does not hate you. It simply does not see you. This was not unusual. Sepia photograph of Victorian women outside a parish dispensary. Shawls pulled tight. Faces obscured by fog and exhaustion. Yet you are not erased. The paper trail remains. The diaries of domestic servants survive. The workhouse testimonies sit in iron-bound boxes. Women like Hannah Kulwick, who documented the exhaustion of service in precise, unflinching ink. Women like Margaret Harkness, who walked the East End and transcribed the voices of mothers who survived by sheer brutal will. They did not ask for pity. They demanded record. They knew that forgetting is the final violence. You belong to their lineage. You are the silence between their sentences. You are the empty space in their ledgers that proves they breathed, they bled, they endured. The system eventually yields, not from mercy but from mathematics. When the cost of burying the poor outweighs the profit of their labour, the state finally moves. The workhouse reforms, the sanitary laws tighten, the midwives train. It takes 70 years. It takes 3 generations. It takes millions of graves. The camera pulls back further. The city shrinks. The century turns. The coal smoke clears. The brick dissolves into glass and steel. But the ledger remains. The arithmetic shifts, but the weight persists. You feel the ghost of it in your hands. You see the stain upon the floor. You hear the rain against the pane. The past does not stay buried. It waits beneath the pavement. It hums in the foundations. It reminds you that survival is never guaranteed. It is negotiated. It is stolen. It is counted in pennies and pulse beats. You step back into the room. You stand beside the cot. You look at the damp wool. You breathe. The air is still. The silence is heavy. You turn to the viewer. The fourth wall fractures. You speak directly. If you think surviving this was brutal, wait until you see what happened inside. Why you wouldn't survive being poor in Victorian London. The alley narrows. The gates lock. The system tightens its grip around your throat. You will learn why the cobblestones remember every footstep. You will learn why the parish never sleeps. You will learn why the ledger always balances. The room breathes again, not with air, with memory. The dust settles upon the floorboards, covering the cracks, hiding the stains, sealing the history beneath a thin layer of ash. You sit in the quiet. You feel the weight lift, not because the suffering ends, because it transforms. It becomes part of the foundation. It becomes the quiet hum beneath the city streets. 9 months carried, 9 lives promised, 4 survived. The ratio echoes in the brickwork. It resonates in the ledger margins. It waits for the next generation to read it aloud. You do not speak of glory. You do not speak of triumph. You speak of endurance, of hands that bleed without complaint, of breaths that continue when they should have ceased, of mothers who count the hours not in joy, but in survival. The dress remembers everything. The walls absorb the silence. The candle gutters. The shadow lengthens. The past does not demand your tears. It demands your witness. Look at the floor. Remember the names. Carry the weight. The story does not conclude. It merely turns the page.